Well, the news couldn't be any worse for me and for Cubs fans. As I've stated, they're on their own, 9-game losing streak.
9. Yeah, 9.
It goes to 9. They got blown out last night again. It's unbelievable what has happened to this team. I guess it's believable. You can see the product they put on the field, and the few major league players that aren't 3A or 4A players, they're hurt. So of course we are in a tailspin, really. So
Nicky went back to the IL, huh?
Yeah. That Madrigal trade is looking very interesting for both sides now. Kind of a total flop, but yeah, I mean, he was back for 3 games or something. Now he's already back in the IL. So just ugly scenes on the north side. But I mean, went into New York last weekend, got the shit kicked out of us. They did get a reunion with Anthony Rizzo. I think you didn't you have a story about Rizzo?
Rizzo during that series, he was asked about, Cubs and the Cubs competing and lack thereof competing. And, he simply just said, like any reasonable person would say, all the big markets teams have plenty of money to spend. So yeah, a team like the Cubs should be competing every single year.
Yep.
It's not a sentiment we haven't expressed on this for both Chicago teams who historically are not competitive. Like, we have more history in Chicago of not having competitive baseball than we have of competitive baseball.
There's a couple 100-year
decades.
drought.
There's decades.
Yeah.
Centuries.
Yeah. I mean, you guys were on an 88-year drought, maybe.
Yeah, I think we cut it off at. We were in the 80. It would have been the 88th. We were in 87, I think. And we took care of that.
Yeah, nice work. Cubs took care of it after 108.
Working on our next 87 still, but
definitely working on their next 108.
So, I mean, so it's like, when you hear that and you think about that, I mean, we are as a whole a pathetic city when it comes to baseball.
Yeah,
that's all. I'm just adding on to what he said.
Yeah,
but
over history, absolutely.
It is just disappointing. Like, it's always been disappointing. I mean, it was a little different earlier. You had so fewer teams making the playoffs. I mean, if you didn't win,
right?
I mean, if you didn't win that, like when the Sox go in 83, Cubs go in 84, they just had to win. They're overly. What was each division, like 15 or 14 teams or 13 teams?
Well, there'd be. Seven divisions.
Yeah, 7 and 7. Yeah, 7 and 7. Each league had 2 divisions of 7 teams each. So I would say it was much more difficult to make the playoffs, and revenue sharing wasn't what it is today. But I would say the biggest disappointment is that Chicago baseball as a whole, there's really no excuse for not competing over the last 2 decades. You know what I mean? Yeah. Not being in that conversation every year. Is every year going to go the way you planned it? No. But you should be in that conversation in September that you are a possible contender for the playoffs.
It's just amazing when you think of where the Cubs were just 6 years ago. On top of the world, had all that young core that looked like it was going to be, a contender every year, which it was a contender, I guess, but they just didn't get it done. But to see that go to where we are today is just astounding. Like how that, promised sustained platform for success, or the platform for sustained success, that is evaporated, and we are clearly in a rebuild once again.
Yeah.
I mean, so the Cubs got their ass kicked in New York. They came home and then got their ass kicked by the Padres, although they're starting the last game of that series in about 5 minutes. We're recording here on a Thursday afternoon. Maybe they can turn it around. Maybe it'll all be different after we get done with the show today. But somehow I don't think so, considering what we've seen the last year or so. But I think it's obvious. I mean, we all know it's obvious that the Cubs are going to be sellers at the trade deadline. So I thought it'd be interesting, at least, find something to talk about with this team. Who the best assets are that they could trade away. So that's going to be another edition of our new power rankings.
Do.
I'll drop in the real imaging right after that. I'll be sure to include yours. So thanks for your participation.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can chime in on this for sure. I've got my list, and you can say it's, debate me who should be number one.
You'll let me? Thank you.
I just want to make sure. I want to make sure you're participating in this because I need your help. But
I'm awake.
Number one, I think you might not know who I'd go with number one. It's not revolution. I've been talking a lot about Wilson Contreras the last few episodes, but I'm going to put Dave Robertson at number one on my top asset that the Cubs have to trade.
I can understand that, having a team with some relief problems.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, every team that's in contention is going to be looking for relievers, let alone elite closers potentially. I mean, we saw the trade last year, of course, between the Cubs and Sox, where you got Craig Kimbrough, for better or worse. That seems like that should have worked out, going after the best closer in the game. We've talked about that forever, about why that failed, and we think that's a failing of the manager, not using people in the right ways. But I think Dave Robertson could help out a team that uses him in the proper way.
Well, yeah, and he's played multiple roles too. He's not it's not one dimensional like Kimbrough.
Exactly.
He's performed in
the seventh and the eighth.
Yeah. So.
And he's having a great. He's got a 1.59 ERA,
sub
one WHIP.
Love him.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest asset that the Cubs have to trade. Number two would be Contreras. I'd put him at number two just because he's a rental. He's a going to be a 30-year-old catcher. I probably don't have the rental part is the biggest thing, but it's trading him it's going to be a big deal for somebody, but I don't think it has quite the value of what Robertson has. It's also difficult to trade for a catcher in the middle of the season. I've heard a lot of discussion about it. That makes sense to me, where you bring in a brand new catcher who has to learn your staff on the fly and has to, get those starters comfortable with him in a very quick manner. So you kind of risk, changing up the vibes you have for your pitching staff that have gotten you into playoff contention by the trade deadline. Bringing in a brand new catcher, could be risky. So that might be another reason, that the whole world might not be coming to the Cubs' door looking for Contreras. I have actually heard specifically this week that the Giants, your San Francisco Giants, might be a trade partner for Contreras, just to support Joey Bart, and I forget your backup catcher, but
really, because Caselas is really the starting catcher at this point, because Bart's not acclimated well to the major leagues.
So there seems to be a bit of a fit there, but there are risks, of course. I'm not saying that's a done deal by any means, but I thought that was interesting just for your and my conversation here, that those two teams were linked.
I think the question about adding Wilson Contreras to your team, though, too, it's multidimensional, and everything you said's right. You bring a guy who doesn't know your system in the middle, and you've got pitchers who's had a comfort level, whether the catcher's been performing or not. They have a comfort level with your starter and your backup. I mean, or in some cases, the pitcher only sees one of the catchers all the time. Either way, but are you bringing? The question is, someone might be bringing Contreras in for his bat, where he doesn't even have to.
That's where I was going to go.
Much,
yep.
And that.
Well, now that we have the universal DH, that means
right. So
why not
he's
bring him
open
in
to 29 other teams.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
not true. We're open up to half the league for who's contending and with the extra wild card spot. But like that
Tigers are not trading for Wilson Contreras.
Unless he's their long-term solution at catcher.
Hey, they're best friends with he and Javi Baez. Maybe that's my radical plan to shake up the Tigers. Trade for Wilson Contreras.
But yeah, so I think I think he remains an asset. And because he can DH for a while after he gets there, as long as you have a decent enough, however you're going to utilize him as catcher, he has more than enough time to get up to speed before he even has to catch. That's the other thing. So
yeah, but that's interesting. That buys some time. So yeah, that's a different dynamic than we've had in the past, at least with the National League, trading within the National League.
Right,
so
exactly.
That might mitigate that uncertainty a little bit. Number 3 on my list would be Ian Happ. And I was wondering if that did that surprise you that I'd have him at number 3?
Well, I don't know the rest of your list, so for now,
Okay.
I guess I would go. I'm fine with that. He's I think he's great in a platoon situation, probably, which someone would be bringing him in for. I don't know that they'd be bringing him in as like a full time starter. He has runs that
Yeah.
like he goes on runs and he looks like the greatest thing, and then he kind of dies off. But there's a lot of guys like that who start every day in
Well,
the MLB. He always reminded me a lot of Adam Engel.
yeah,
So
Ingles far more athletic, I think, and a better fielder, but Hap's bat has really come to light. He's having the best year of his career right now, and it's really good timing for this trade potential because he's got a 2.2 WAR right now. His OPS plus is 136, which is
yeah, it's pretty good.
yeah, by definition 36% better than average, so than league average. So he's boosting his value as much as possible. And if he wasn't putting up those numbers, I certainly wouldn't have him number 3 on the list. But the main reason I put him number 3 is the rest of the options the Cubs have are such wild cards. It's hard to say. And I'm actually going to group 4 players at number 4 because I don't know what to do with them, and they're all starting pitchers. I mean, the whole point of picking up Wade Miley off the scrap heap, off the waiver wires from the Reds, who inexplicably got rid of him, who because he had a really solid year last year. They just didn't want to compete for whatever reason. Yeah, he's just hurt all. He's been hurt twice now. I think it's his second stint in the IL, so I don't know if he's even going to be a factor or healthy by the time the trade deadline comes around. But he would definitely be a piece that I think they assume they would be able to move on a 1-year deal, move him at the deadline if things didn't work out. Drew Smiley is in that boat. Similar. I don't think he has quite the upside or quite the value necessarily of Miley, but if he's healthier, he might end up being number 4 on the list. Getting a little more radical is Mark Stroman. That he's on a 3-year deal. That doesn't mean he's untouchable, but again, he's not healthy, and or he can't guarantee he's healthy. So he's had his moments with the Cubs, and then as soon as he looks like he's putting it together, he's out either with COVID or now this injury. So, but the one that's really I never thought would be on this list is Kyle Hendricks. And it's almost like the Cubs are finally coming to that realization that it might be time to move him because they are obviously going nowhere, but he might be fairly valuable as a playoff veteran. He has performed admirably in the playoffs before. He knows what he's doing. It doesn't mean he's a guarantee, but I could see a veteran presence like him being a welcome addition to a contending team, in the middle to back of their rotation. He came back, pitched only 5 innings in his return after being out for, I think it was like 13 games or 13 days. And it was almost like the Cubs put him out there to show the world that he's healthy and he's solid. And he actually left the game with a 5-0 lead, and immediately they lost 12-5.
Yeah. If you blink right now, you turn away from that Cubs game for a minute. I saw that game. I was looking at MLB scores and I'm like, oh wow, that's awesome. Cubs are putting it to the Padres. I'm happy as a Giants fan. And then all of a sudden I'm like, the Cubs lost 12-5 because it was like the fifth freaking inning.
Yeah, it fell apart quickly. That escalated quickly.
I've always thought, I think I brought this up to you at the beginning of the year where I think you had just a little bit higher hopes for the team than how they're performing. I thought from day one, because he's still signed for a couple of years, right? Hendricks?
Yes, yeah.
I've always thought from day one, he is a high trade piece for someone who's looking for I mean, in most cases, someone's looking for a fifth starter, and that guy and Kyle Hendricks is your fifth starter.
That would be that's
I mean,
replete with starters at that point. So.
Yeah, like that is you're gonna get because of the control. He's not a high stress pitcher, so there's no reason to believe he is going. And he just came off a little bit of an injury, but there's no reason to believe that he will have any sort of like high stress injury that would keep him out for any extended period of time because of how he pitches, at least in regards to his arms, his arm. And I just think you could get a somewhat of a decent haul for him at the trade deadline.
Yeah, I like your argument. We could even think about pushing him up past Ian Happ to maybe number 3 on the list because for the reasons you just brought up.
So. I mean, he's got his lifetime ERA is like in the 3s. I mean, he's got a resume. He's got out of him and Contreras have the and Robertson too. They all have like decent major league resumes. So that goes a long way, especially at the trade deadline. So.
Well, we're at June 16th today, and that's a little bit early for trades, but we've seen them in June before. Especially, I think it might make sense for to trade a starting pitcher earlier than later for the team that's acquiring him, just to get that many more starts out of them.
True.
So we might be seeing some action on that front. So I know. Thanks for participating in this Cubs conversation. I need all your help, all the support I can get as I'm struggling to find entertaining ways to talk about this team. It's tough. It's a tough watch. I mean, like you said, even if they get a lead, you just wait for something to implode, and it has imploded in spectacular ways over the last few weeks. I mean, literally, they're the first team. What is it? I think they're the first team ever to have given up 18 or more runs in a game 3 times in the same season.
Really? Wow.
How is this possible? How are these things happening? But that is the state of the Cubs.
Well, you get those position players pitching where Schwindel's in the record books.
Yeah.
That was what the hardest, the deepest hit ball ever at 35 miles an hour or something like that.
Yeah, I had that written down.
It's something goofy, like it's the usual baseball stuff that you can pull his history out of any little thing that occurs. Kind of like the Tops Now card we talked about last week for Hunter Green.
Yeah, I wrote down Frank the Tank threw a 35-mile-an-hour fastball for a home run to Kyle Higashioka. Forgot his name, the Yankees catcher, but I didn't write down how many feet it went, unfortunately. But
yeah, it is some kind of. It's just that pitch has never been thrown that slow or something that was, and then it ended up being a home run. So there you go.
Word Hole Media.